you. What's up, Fabian? Random question. How do you ground morality? By the way, I saw another Elliot in your chat. Just want to remind you I was the first Elliot fan. That's like a really long and like difficult question to answer, right? I would say that it starts with the primacy of existence, and then grounded in formal logic, and then argumentation ethics, creates the domain of things that I cannot justify, even if I feel icky about it, cannot justify using violence against. And for that whole domain of unanswered situations, we move from formal logic into, baby objectivist philosophy. I think the objectivists are wrong in saying that you ought aggress upon people during certain situations, because I think it then makes their entire philosophy arbitrary, because any situation can be an emergency. So the classical objectivists that say, yeah, you should generally act towards your survival as a species and towards your own rational self-interest, but when it's an emergency, you can kind of give all that up. Well, then what is or isn't an emergency, right? Like then U.S. aid is an emergency because there are children dying, in Africa of AIDS. And they go, oh, well, it's not an emergency for me. Okay, well, it can be an emergency for you, because if AIDS leaves Africa because all the white women can't stop fucking black dudes, because of whatever reason or some shit, then two things are true. We need U.S. aid, and we have to start beating the shit out of all white women that are inward lovers, because that's the only way to stop the AIDS epidemic to spreading from the whites, which are my own people. Well, that would be a crazy ideology to say that we need U.S. aid and giant NGO government programs to sell gender theory, into Pakistan, and we also simultaneously need to beat the shit out of all white women that are we suspect of having had sex with a black man. That would be a crazy ideology. And yet I could make the argument that that is indeed an emergency. It's an emergency. That AIDS is a death sentence, and that it's spreading somewhere else. So in order to stop the spread of AIDS, we got to start beating the shit out of inward lovers, and we got to start pumping U.S. aid money. Mutt's Law, that's fucking wild. Right? And so I think the idea of making it, arbitrarily being able to decide that objectivism is like only a preference of self-interest, and that emergency gets rid of that, I think is incorrect. And I think the ANCAPs have correctly realized that the non-aggression principle is just a truth grounded in logic. But in that domain of what ought I do, when I don't know, when I can't prove that an action is unjustifiable, what ought I do in a domain of possible actions is that I ought to engage to the best of my ability with the knowledge that I have in my own rational self-interest. Once I finish my master's, I'm going to start studying argumentation ethics. Hell yeah, dude. Ortho bro only debate tactic. How can you ground logic without God? I mean, it's like the really simple answer to that is it's unnecessary. Like it's just unnecessary. It's an unnecessary step that they add. And then they act like it's like the end all defeating thing against everyone that isn't a Christian. And then they just use it as a cudgel against humanists that have no logical grounding for anything. And then they say, see, I have faith, and that grounds it. But it's circular logic. Dude, I utterly fucking demolished Jim Bob on this. And I had a debate against Jim Bob, and he was just completely destroyed. And then he just pretended like he won, and all of his people pretended like they won. He completely ignored my opening statement, and then he tried to argue that Christian nationalism is just when Christians vote in other Christians in power, and so therefore all of my arguments against Christian nationalism are really just arguments against the concept of democracy, because democracy and Christian nationalism are the exact same thing, one to one, if people identify as Christians and they vote in people who identify as Christians. And it's like, dude, like he just ran from the prompt, ran for the hills, utterly, completely defeated. And he kept trying this thing, like, you can't ground morality. And then he would laugh and interrupt and make jokes. Yeah, it's like he does every debate as if he's debating like a, oh my God, what are those people called? Behavioral, like the humanists. Andrew Wilson is a much better debater than Jim Bob and Jay Dyer. Those that's another big one. Jay Dyer is worse than Jim Bob for sure. Jim Bob's just trying to have fun, and he's trying to win a debate. Jay Dyer is trying to like stoke hatred against you and derision, and it's like it's very obviously like that his bad faith argument comes from malice, from a wounded person with an evil heart. I genuinely think Jay Dyer is like if I found out that Jay Dyer did like some horrific shit, I'd be like, yeah, that tracks. If I found that out about Jim Bob, I'd be like, holy shit, I met him. He seemed cool. You know what I mean? Like he seemed cool. Like he seemed like a good guy. Like we have some different disagreements, you know? And I would, and if I found that out about Andrew Wilson, I would be like, I demand proof. I need better proof. A fucking news article is like not enough for me, because like every interaction I've ever had with Andrew Wilson behind the scenes has always been him being a respectful person. And if you respect him, he respects you. That if you have respected and stood by him, he will do what he can to help you out. That he actively tries to get rid of evil people and like pedos and shit from the community. Even if he can't make content out of it, he will do what he can to keep people away from those people. Anytime there's been like drama and I've been like, yo, that was heavy-handed. When I found out more, I'm like, oh, that person probably deserved it to some degree. Right? Like I would like, so that's kind of like in the hierarchy of like the ortho bros, right? Like genuinely, I think Andrew Wilson is probably a good person with good intentions, though I don't like his debate style and I disagree with his politics. Jim Bob, I think, just wants clout and just wants to win and just wants to be seen. Jay Dyer, I genuinely just think is a piece of shit. He's like every alarm bell that I have of like, don't trust this person, this is a bad person, goes off. Here's some bad takes on homosexuality to be expected. Yeah, probably. I don't know that I've heard a bunch of his shit, but I assume it's like Christian hardline homosexuality is gross and bad and evil or some shit.